those to justice who are responsible. We will provide you with further updates as warranted, and as I mentioned, a readout of the President's call with the Prime Minister. Turning to the events of today, this morning the President received his daily intelligence briefing. He stopped by in the Women in Healthcare panel hosted by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Systems Administrator Seema Verma, and also that event was attended by the Vice President and the Health and Human Services Secretary, Dr. Tom Price. Healthcare professionals have seen the challenges of implementing Obamacare firsthand. They're a valuable asset to the President and his team as we continue to consider and enact policies like the American Health Care Act that will make healthcare more accessible and affordable for everyone. The women who are at the roundtable today represent the physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and administrators who make sure that people around the country receive the necessary preventative and life-saving care that they need every day. The doctors who attend to the patients in the family practices, emergency rooms, and clinics, and those who support them on the administrative and technical sides are one of our country's most treasured resources. With the passage of the American Health Care Act and the rest of the President's health care reform agenda, everyone, regardless of their financial situation, will be able to take full advantage of this resource. That's why at last count, over 40 major associations have expressed their support for the American Health Care Act, with several of them, including the U.S. Chamber, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and just today, the National Taxpayers Union, calling it a key vote. Following his appearance at the panel, the President and his Legislative Affairs team hosted several members of the House of Representatives for another meeting on the American Health Care Act. The President acknowledged, as he has before, that the AHCA is only one step in the larger process of fixing the broken health care system created by Obamacare, but it's an essential first step. Undoing and fixing all of the misguided policies is going to require a holistic, multi-step process. And that's why the President and his team are fully committed to maintaining an open line of communication with Capitol Hill leadership throughout this entire process. Throughout the weeks since the ACH was first introduced, they have been meeting with Republican members from across the political spectrum, many of them who we've seen move from no to yes as they learn more about the legislation and amendments that have been adopted. Continued coordination between administrative and legislative actions will ensure that our new healthcare system is effective and efficient. This afternoon, the President will meet with the Congressional Black Caucus's Executive Committee. The President has brought in and will continue to hear from representatives of all interests as he continues to note that he is the President of all Americans. Diversity makes our nation strong, and it also means that we don't necessarily agree on every policy item, but that we continue to have a dialogue towards productive policies that help America move forward. The President looks forward to discussing the CBC's policy priorities and finding ways that they can work together where those priorities align. This evening, the President will have dinner with Secretary of State Tillerson. Today at the State Department, Secretary Tillerson hosted the foreign ministers and senior leaders of the Global Coalition working to defeat ISIS for the first meeting of the full coalition of 68 members since December of 2014. This meeting follows up on the Defense Ministerial Secretary Mattis hosted last month in Brussels. The coalition is united in the fight against ISIS, and this meeting seeks to accelerate international efforts to defeat ISIS in the remaining areas it holds in Iraq and Syria, while maximizing pressure on its branches, affiliates, and networks. This meeting is part of our whole-of-government approach to defeating ISIS. The Trump administration will use all of the tools of national power in coordination with our international powers to cut off ISIS's funding, expand intelligence sharing, and deny ISIS geographic and online safe havens. Also today over on the Hill, Judge Gorsuch, in his second day of questioning by the Senate Judiciary Committee, during his nearly 12 hours of questioning yesterday, now at least I know how someone else feels, the judge continued to prove himself an enormously qualified jurist that Americans will all be proud to see on the Supreme Court. It's not surprising that Senate Democrats are failing to gain traction for any of their pot shots and opposition to Judge Gorsuch. There's simply not enough politicizing in the Senate Democrats can do to hide the fact that Judge Gorsuch is an immensely qualified and thoughtful jurist with a lifelong dedication to our Constitution. A few administrative notes before I take your question. Last night, we formally announced that the President will travel to Brussels for the May 25th meeting of NATO heads of state and government. During this meeting, the President looks forward to reaffirming our commitment to NATO and discussing critical issues to the alliance, especially Allied responsibility sharing and NATO's role against the fight against terrorism. The President will also host NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg to the White House on April 12th. Today, the President declared major disaster exists in the state of Wyoming and ordered federal assistance to supplement state, tribal, and local recovery efforts in the areas affected by a severe winter storm and straight-line winds that occurred in February. We also announced that the President will deliver this year's commencement address at Liberty University on May 13th. The President's proud to call Liberty's President, Jerry Falwell, his wife Becky, and their entire family as friends, and looks forward to celebrating the success of this amazing graduating class on such a momentous occasion. Finally, a few minutes ago, many of you may have seen that the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, gave remarks on the surveillance collected on individuals associated with the President. Let me quote him directly. Quote, I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value were widely disseminated in the intelligence community reporting. And third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth, and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or the Trump team. My understanding is that Chairman Nunes is coming to the White House later to brief the President on this development, and we will have a readout for that meeting once it occurs. With that, I'd be glad to take your questions. Mara.
Two questions, one on Nunes and then healthcare. Is your understanding that this, none of these unmasked names were leaked?
I don't know. I literally read the statement, or heard the statement, came out and briefed it. It was wrapping up as we were beginning this.
Okay. Today, in the pool spray, the President said, keep your doctor, keep your plan. Didn't work out that way. You didn't get your doctor, you don't get your plan. This is one of the reasons we have to repeal Obamacare. Is the President assuring people who currently like their plan or like their doctor that under the American Health Care Act they can keep their doctor and their plan?
Well, that's the hope. And what I mean by that is not to be cute, but last time they were promised something that didn't turn out. I can't promise something that a doctor stays in a plan or a plan stays there. But that's a bit different. We understand that we're letting market forces come into play here. Competition, doctors can change what insurances they take, plans can come in and out of markets. What I think we can be assured of is a couple things. One is that currently, under Obamacare, premiums are set to continue to skyrocket. We've seen an average of 25%. We've noted before in Arizona, they've gone up 116%. I think there's no question that the additional competition and amendments that have been brought into this discussion will help lower the trajectory of that, number one. Number two is I think that there's going to see greater choice. So I think those are the things that we're willing to talk about being part of this plan, because you can't, where they erred last time is went out and made promises that they couldn't keep. And I think that one of the problems that they did is that they've tried to suppress market forces and competition, and instead of lowering costs and increasing choice, which is what they sought to do, it did the opposite. So that's where this is headed, and I think that's important. John.
Thanks so much, Sean. On the AHCA, Mark Meadows, who appears to be a firm no in terms of his opposition to the replacement bill, said that 25 members of the Freedom Caucus are opposed to this replacement bill. Do you dispute those numbers?
I'm not going to share our whip count. I know we saw Lou Barletta, who was a hard no, come out and say he's yes. Steve King, I believe, had been a no. He's a yes. Member by member, we're seeing tremendous support flow in our direction, and the count keeps getting stronger for us. So I'm not going to start to get into yes or no's, but I would just say that, former Congressman Mulvaney, now director of OMB Mulvaney, who is a leader in that caucus, has been a very strong advocate of this policy. As you know, he's been up on the Hill talking to his former colleagues, assuring them of the effort and why the process has to go the way it does. But I'm optimistic in the sense of what we're seeing and the trajectory that this is going and the number of votes that are flowing our way, not the other way.
And on the confirmation hearing for Judge Neil Gorsuch, I have not seen any Democrat come out in support of Judge Gorsuch just yet. Do you anticipate that you'll get Democratic support on this particular nomination?
I hope and believe so. I think that there have been several that have been spoken very positively. I think he's been extremely impressive throughout this confirmation process. And you've heard members, both in the Senate, on the committee, and then a lot of outside voices comment on how well he's done, how qualified he is. And I think it's tough for anybody to say that he's not immensely qualified for this position. Alexis.
Sean, related to Congressman Nunez, can you explain why the White House has agreed to meet with him at all about what his findings are? And the reason I ask that is because the minute that Director Comey said that there was an official investigation, it might appear as if the White House is interfering with the investigation, and Congressman Nunez should present his information not to the White House, but to the FBI. So why is anyone here at the White House agreeing to meet with him about his findings?
We'll have a readout for you after that meeting. I think he did this press conference. He made the announcement that he was coming up to see the president to share these findings. I don't know who else he shared them with. I don't know, to your question, I don't know if he's briefed anyone else on it in terms of the intelligence community, either Admiral Rogers or Comey, or whether this is something they shared with him. But I think as after the meeting, hopefully, depending on the classification level, we may be able to share more on that with you.
Can I just add, is the president concerned at all that there will be an appearance immediately today that he has interfered with an ongoing investigation, whether it's a congressional investigation or the executive branch investigation, by meeting privately with a congressman who says he has information?
So let me get this straight. Number one, we asked, as you know, 2 weeks ago, we said this is the appropriate venue. Number two, you guys have asked us over and over again, why aren't we meeting with certain individuals? The chairman of the committee, that one of the two committees that we asked to look into this, wants to share his findings. I don't, or what he knows. I think that is exactly how we've talked about this working. But I would leave it to Congressman Nunez to come up and to brief and share his thoughts. I don't know what his plan is. Obviously, he briefed the media before he briefed us. He went down and talked about what he had found. So, you know, it's interesting. I didn't see any complaints from you guys when he went down and held a press conference for the umpteenth time talking about his findings and what he's found. There's no complaints from the media when he shares what he's found with you guys. But when he wants to come up here and tell us this is where the investigation stands and here's what I've learned, there seems to be a little bit of an interesting double standard on that.
To close the loop, because the president said that he had additional information that he believed the White House or he or his representatives would present related to this investigation, what Congressman Nunez has is not related to that.
You're asking me questions that he has not briefed us. He has not briefed the president. You guys, as I noted, he actually went down and spoke to the media before he shared this with us. So, you know, I would ask the colleagues that ask questions more than collectively, the media has more of an opportunity to ask questions and to hear what he has to say than we do at this point. So once we have more to understand what he said, to the extent that we can, I'm sure we'll be glad to share it with you. But the media has more information than we do at this point. John.
Sean, staying on that up there. Didn't we already know that there was incidental collection of intelligence involving some members of the transition team? And I point to...
Not the way you guys ask the questions. I mean, you questioned us every day about what we knew, and now you're coming back to me saying, didn't we already know this? Well,
No, but didn't we
guess
already
I'm
know
doing
that
somewhat of an effective job.
Flynn was monitored in his conversations with Kislyak?
Right.
So we knew about that.
I guess my point, John, is I don't know. He made a statement, went down to the press. Until we get briefed on this, until the president gets briefed, I don't know what he knows. And so to ask, until that occurs and until we have the ability to share some of that in an unclassified nature, I don't want to get ahead of it. I don't know what he knows. That's why apparently he's coming up to share his findings with the president. At least that's what he said. Again, let's wait and see how this unfolds.
And on the American Health Care Act, Mark Meadows says they don't have the votes, they need to start over and do a new bill. That sounds like you're in pretty serious trouble.
No, that sounds like one member's opinion. As I mentioned...
Who represents a large contingent of
No,
people
but
who
again,
oppose
I
the
just
bill.
named a few of the members that are part of that caucus that are come on board. I think that, look, every day you see more and more of those members from that caucus and throughout the entire conference expressed their support for the bill. The president was up yesterday for a while talking to them. We've had members in. The vice president's been actively engaged. Mick Mulvaney, Reince Priebus, Mark Short, and Rick Dearborn, who lead our Leg Affairs team. These guys have been flooding the Hill. They've been on the phone and having meetings with them. There's been a series of members up here all day. I think the trajectory is going very well for us. And
And Heritage Action says you can easily fix this bill simply by removing the regulatory framework, the tax credits and all of that, and you'll get massive buy-in from conservatives. But can you do that?
There's
Can you
certain
make it
constraints
like-
that we have in the reconciliation process. And, for those who are steeped in the arcane rules of the Senate, there's a thing called the Byrd Rule. And it does not allow policy to be created. It has to do with the budgetary nature of that vehicle to get that's sustainable at 50 votes. Right now, there are certain things that I think a lot of people would like, but that will not potentially get ruled in order by the Senate parliamentarian. So I understand what people want, but I think that we have created a vehicle to get this done. This is the only way that we will repeal and replace Obamacare. And again, I think people have to recognize that there is a three-step process to doing this. This is exactly how the Democrats enacted it, and this is exactly how we will unwind it and implement a much better system. That's it, plain and simple. Margaret.
Sean, I know you can't get ahead of Nunez, but what he said was incidental legal surveillance using a FISA warrant, which would
So that's not, he
suggest-
didn't, I don't believe he said FISA warrant.
He did.
Did he? Okay.
He did. And that's why I'm asking this question, which is, does the Trump administration have the presumption that foreign leaders or foreign nationals will not be surveilled when they are in contact with
No,
Trump?
again, as I said, I don't want to start talking or guessing what he may say or may not say or explain this. I think that we will have more information, or I hope to have more information once the president is briefed, and to find out, what else has gone on in terms of additional information on this. But I do think it is a starting revelation, and there's a lot of questions that need to get asked. I think it's interesting. All of the questions are in the presumptive negative towards us, as opposed to, why was this taking place? Why were people surveilled? Ostensibly they were involved in the campaign. Because it's not. No. The question is the question.
Your presumption. What was your presumption that foreign
Well,
nationals?
no. It's not
when
a
they were in
presumption.
contact
Actually,
with
I'm not the
Trump
one.
will not be
Right.
surveilled?
Respectfully, I'm not the one with the presumption. You guys are. I even come up here presuming anything. I actually started my comments off by saying
Well,
that
I
I.
would presume that foreign nationals are being monitored by U.S. intelligence
And-
when they are talking to
Okay, and then
anyone.
I think and then the question. Then I think there's a series of questions, which is how many times was an individual picked up? Why were they picked up? Were they unmasked? Again, a lot of this, if they're picked up during a FISA warrant, is that American citizens are prohibited by law from being unmasked, from quote having their name put out there. Why would someone's name get put out there? What ways were they described? There's a lot of questions that need to get asked. Those are the relevant issues that need to get asked. How many times was one individual followed? Did their name get unmasked and why? But there's a lot of things that need to get followed up on. We're not at that position yet, as I've said now multiple times. The chairman's going to come up here, brief the president. I don't know to what extent and to what detail, but hopefully as we move forward, we will have more.
Is this what you've been? Because you've said there's more information to come. More information to come. Is this what
I
you
don't
were
know.
gesturing towards?
I don't know. I for the 8th time, there is no. We don't know what he's going to come up here and explain and share. And until that happens, for me to talk about where we think this is headed, again, we're not in the business of trying to get to this point yet. We say this is what they have. We've asked that the investigation be conducted and that people gather up information. What they have and to what extent, we'll know soon. April.
Sean, I have a series of questions on the topic. Gwen Carr, the mother of Eric Garner, met with an official here at the White House yesterday. She's looking for fairness and justice in her son's case. What should we expect to come out of that meeting with this White House official? Should there be a push to make sure that there is an indictment of the police officers?
I mean, that's a Department of Justice question, and I think that for us to get involved in a specific case would be highly inappropriate in terms of trying to guess what the outcome of a case should be.
Well, along that line, the official, according to Ms. Carr, reached out to the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, had the wrong number, called another department and had the right number. Now, in previous administrations, to include the Obama administration and other administrations, the Department of Justice had limited the numbers of people to call over to the Department of Justice. Has the Attorney General, this Attorney General Sessions, changed that memo? What has he done in reference to?
Well, it would have to be reissued. That's a separate issue in terms of every Attorney General issues a memo going back to, I think Mukasey was the first one that maybe post-Watergate. I'm trying to remember who issued the first one, but it has been a practice of, I think, almost every Attorney General to issue a memo spelling out the procedures that officials in the Justice Department contact the White House and who they can contact and the nature of which and what their exceptions are, et cetera. Those memos get crafted by each administration, by each new Attorney General. I would refer you back to the Department of Justice on the status of that under this Attorney General.
So how many officials here have that right to call the Department of Justice?
I don't know.
even
Again,
ask for a
I would
recall?
refer you to the Department of Justice.
But was there wrongdoing in this effort to
I
call
don't.
over to the
I
Department
don't
of
know.
Justice?
I don't know the nature of. I'll have to look into what you're asking, but I would again refer you back to the Department of Justice. Hunter.
Yes, thank you, Sean. I have two quick questions. Last November, President Trump dismissed reports he was trying to obtain security clearances for his children as, quote, a typically false news story. Now there are reports Ivanka Trump is indeed attempting to obtain a clearance. What changed there?
Well, at the time, it was not true. I mean, she wasn't obtaining a security clearance, so it was not accurate then. There was no. I think we addressed it during the transition. An official had actually just inquired. There was no actual attempt at the time. The official in question was removed from the transition team. They had merely made an inquiry into what it would take to get an SF-86 process moving forward. No paperwork was ever drawn, no account was open, and that official was let go. At this time, as I mentioned yesterday, Ivanka has decided to go above and beyond and act in certain ways to ensure that she complies with certain rules by maintaining the Federal Records Act, getting a security clearance so that if she is privy to any information that is classified, she has to abide by the same rules and regulations in terms of being in a room and how it's handled, et cetera. We've taken appropriate measures to do that. I mentioned the statement yesterday, and we'll stick by it.
And
John?
a second question on Paul
Yeah.
Manafort.
Yeah.
The Associated Press has published a report based on documents that he had a plan to, quote unquote, benefit Vladimir Putin for a client. And with him back in the headlines, I'm just wondering if you still stand by the comment that he had a, quote unquote, limited role in the campaign. And if you could explain a little bit more about how